Ooh, my volume is up. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is our call about, is your relationship healthy? And I think it's a great question. I thought it was a great question. And I think it's one that in many ways we ask ourselves, okay, what's happening? Maybe there's something that's not feeling good. Is it healthy? Is it not healthy? How do we know? Um, what what's needed if it's not healthy, if it's not feeling good, where can we shift something? And I think that these are the things I'm going to be sharing with you today are ways that you can really look at the different aspects of your relationships. And I would suggest you choose one and you look at it. But what you will find is you will start thinking of other ones. Oh, that doesn't happen there. Oh, that's never happened there. Like that's going to happen naturally. But if you can stay focused on one, it will help you to, there's Jen. It will help you to um, really take in what I'm talking about and see those places where in the one relationship that you're thinking of, um, that maybe the things are going well, so you can feel that, and then also those places where maybe it's not. And often I find it's one of those wherever you go, there you are kinds of things. Hi, Jen, welcome. That you may see patterns in your relationships, like, wow, in this relationship, this isn't happening, but oh, wow, look, it's not happening here or here or here or here either. And, or there may be one that's like a shining example um, of a great healthy relationship. You've got one aspect that works really well in one relationship that's not working in others. So I want you to come into this with curiosity, thinking about one relationship, and then you can let yourself go off on little tangents, but come back to that one relationship, because that is what I see happens a lot with this. And all of these things also apply to your relationship with yourself. So this is not even just, is my relationship with someone else healthy, but also with yourself. How are these things showing up or not showing up in your life? So, I am Rebecca Thompson Hitt. I'm the founder and executive director of the Consciously Parenting Project and the Consciously Connected Village, which is our latest iteration of recognizing that a lot of the people that I started working with now have adult children, and other people are bringing their friends who don't have kids, and so I wanted to have a space where it can grow with us, and even our adult children are welcome to continue their growth, their evolution. Um, and so it's, as my own kids have grown, now they're 20 and 25. I'm also in a very different space in terms of parenting, and I still really love parents and working with you all and those ways that our children challenge us. Yeah. So that maybe no one else does. I think our kids have a way of bringing this stuff up for us like nothing else. So I am here with Jen Girardi. So Jen, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen, and I'm sort of on the opposite end of the parenting spectrum, just about. I have a 5 and an 8-year-old at the moment, and I'm the facilitator in our village. So I lead a lot of our live calls and answer a lot of your questions and post, sort of additional extra content to supplement the stuff that Rebecca's got for the course. And I've gotten totally obsessed with healthy relationships. And, I came to this because of having kids, particularly my oldest, who is very challenging right from the beginning. And so I came for my own support. And then as I've learned and as those relationships have gotten easier, or at least as I've learned how to navigate them better when they're not, it's expanded out to now I'm fascinated by looking at every relationship from, our closest and most intimate relationships to like the cashier at the grocery store, like every interaction and how we create community and safety and health in all of the relationships and all of the aspects of community.
Awesome. Yeah, it is. It does become this thing that you start noticing all kinds of things that you never would have paid attention to before in sometimes unlikely situations. Like yeah, so yeah, and yes, you are definitely on the opposite end of the parenting spectrum, and I really appreciate that too. That boots on the ground kind of, I am in it and I am here with you, solidarity for those who are parenting younger kids. So all right. So, what I'm going to be sharing with you today, and some of you may be familiar with this already, some of you may not be, but no, even if you are, you aren't, you're going to hear something that you did not know. I guarantee that. I will probably say something that I didn't know I knew. That's how this all works. And I appreciate questions. I appreciate if you have a story, if you have something that it touches on for you. We have a small group, and that makes it a great opportunity um, to have a little bit of space for sharing as well. If you feel an impulse, just raise your hand physically, or you can push the little button and you can raise your hand, whatever is easiest for you. So these are Ray Castellino's principles. He ran uh, gosh, and words today. Um, a clinic in Santa Barbara, California for almost 30 years, and it's actually still running. And these are the things that he observed about families that were working well or groups that were working well. And they seem to be absent in families or groups that weren't working well. And when I first started working with Ray, he had 5 principles. So they evolved over the time that I knew him. And I don't know, I think if he had lived a little bit longer, that there probably would have been a couple of more. So it is definitely a living, breathing thing that we're talking about here. And um yeah, so I think that's it about where this comes from. So thank you to Ray Castellino for all of your work with families and groups. He did a lot of group work too. So this also applies even if it's not a group of people that know each other already, or who are spending a lot of time together. These are the things that really help a group to be healthy or not. So, Jen, we have the 8 principles. Do you want to, do you have any that you're particularly fond of that you want to share? Or I can start. Just want to check in with you.
Um, why don't we just switch off? Like you read one and then we'll
Sure.
kind of reflect and then I'll read the next one. We can both reflect and that way neither of us has to talk the whole time.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So I'll start. So the very first principle is the principle of welcome. And this is, how do you feel when you come into a new space? How do you feel if you're a parent when your child comes into the room? Do you feel welcoming? It is our birthright to feel welcome. And depending upon what happened in your very early story, and I'm talking a lot right now about birth and that the experience of how we came into the world, how that shows up later, and that can influence how it feels if you came in and you were welcomed coming in, or if you weren't welcomed for any reason. And sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with us. It could be the circumstances under which we were born, something else that happened at the same time. But it's that felt sense in our bodies of welcome. And can we welcome those aspects of ourselves? So this is, can we welcome our own thoughts, feelings, what's happening in our bodies? Can we welcome those aspects of ourselves? And then are they welcome in other situations? So think about the relationship that you came in to consider. This is a healthy relationship. And do you feel welcome in that relationship? And does the other person feel welcomed by you? Are thoughts and feelings and whatever's happening welcomed both ways? So this is our birthright to feel welcomed. And not only coming in, but welcoming ourselves on the planet and into our family of origin. All of those things are part of a healthy relationship, is that there is welcome. And if there's not welcome for some reason, that there is repair around that. So if my child comes into the room and I'm having a really bad day, and that has nothing to do with them, and I am not welcoming, maybe they come in, I don't even notice. And maybe, his feelings are hurt because of that. And I notice it. I can come back later and I can say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You came down and I wasn't even able to greet you. I had my own thing going on. It had nothing to do with you. Or maybe it did have something to do with you. Wow, we got into a fight last night and I'm still really upset about it." So it's acknowledgement around that. So welcome. So a healthy relationship welcomes, and that's including of yourself. So any questions, or Jen, anything to add about welcome?
I think the piece that I want to add for everyone who's, considering this in the context of a specific relationship is curiosity. Because it can be really easy to judge, like, I'm annoyed with my kid bursting in on me in the bathroom. I'm not welcoming right now. I'm the worst parent ever. Um, you know, or even if it's, our seeing in ourselves in our family of origin or in a relationship that's happening now, not feeling welcome, that we don't need to go straight to a place of, oh, I'm doing it wrong or they're doing it wrong, but to curiosity about what is in the way of welcome.
Yeah. Thank you,
Because
Jen.
sometimes it's very valid things like, I would like to be able to go to the bathroom in privacy.
Yes, I am not welcoming of you right now, and that's okay. Yeah. 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 Sarah.
I also think this is it's a fascinating thing, and I heard Maya Angelou talking in regards to this years ago, and I incorporated it into my children's growing up. They're now adults, but I had an interesting experience with my daughter, who is introverted and I am extroverted, and that was definitely something to navigate through our parenting. The first time she was old enough to be at home by herself, when she was 12, and I left with my son and then came back, and I was anxious about this, and I was so excited, ran in the house, ran upstairs, knocked on her door. "I'm so excited to see you. How's your hour and a half been, or 2 hours been?" And she's like, "Hi, Mom. I'll come down when I'm ready." And I was like, "Oh, this is this is for me being extroverted and wanting to have that effusiveness, that it wasn't necessarily her personality." And so then she did come down, and then so it helped me to sort of tone down things to meet her where she was and what kind of energy she was also wanting. So
Yeah. 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 So we may have different ideas about what welcome means and the intensity and the pacing of that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. And good on you for like, okay, I see you. Let me just back up. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah.
I also think that's such a great illustration of how in a lot of these things, it's often not that someone has an intention to be unwelcoming. You know, there's often a mismatch in understanding or needs, and without some kind of support to get to bridge that gap, it can feel like somebody is unwelcoming when that's not the intention. You know, particularly in close relationships where we're with each other all the time in families.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next one is mutual support and cooperation, which I think goes very nicely from welcome and what we were just sharing. Mutual support and cooperation. So do you want to take that one, Jen? You're muted.
Helps if I unmute first. So mutual support and cooperation as connection in a way that mutually respects and encourages each other's well-being. This is not cooperation at the expense of self or to try to get someone else to do something. It's non-competitive and it's a win-win. And I feel like this is probably one of my favorite principles, and also sometimes one of the hardest ones to figure out because we're just so steeped in that kind of conditional, you know, I'll do what you want only if you do what I want, or, you know, or I'll do what you want, but because I'm self-sacrificing and judging myself as not good enough if I don't do what you want. Um, and so, but at the same time, it's so liberating when we can actually be in a place of recognizing, you know, is there mutual support and cooperation? And if not, what needs to happen to get there? You know, what do I need, or what does the other person need, or what additional support do we maybe need so that we're not each other's only source of mutual support and cooperation? Um, but it just completely upends all of the ideas that we're ingrained with about, you know, behavior and rewards and punishments and manipulation, and just create space for, you know, how can we support each other and be on a team together. And even with pretty young children, you know, this is an idea where, you know, this is a conversation I have regularly with my 8-year-old. You know, when something is not going well between us, and I can say, you know, I can see that you need a thing and I need a thing. How can we be on a team to accomplish that? And once we can both come back to the idea that we're going to try to be on a team to get what both of us need met, you know, it might still require some creativity or experimentation to actually accomplish it. But once we're back on that team place, then we're working together from a place of connection, even if it's still challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the hardest things for me, and what I didn't observe in my own home growing up, is this working together that's not at the expense of self. So I saw a lot of that modeled in my home of, I will do the things, but I'm kind of a martyr. I'm sacrificing look at all the sacrifices I'm doing for you. And that doesn't feel good. And that's not the energy that I want to come into my relationships with my family, with my friends. But like recognizing those ways that we may sacrifice ourselves supposedly for the good, but sacrificing ourselves doesn't actually mean mutual support and cooperation. And so that's been something, you know, I think Jen, you said, you know, this is one of your favorites, but it's also one of the hardest. And I think it is, for me too. It's so beautiful when we can find a way where our needs and the other person's needs matter, and that we're finding our way together where it's win-win. It's not competitive. Yeah. Yeah. So anybody have any thoughts or questions about that one? Any examples that come to mind of, yeah, Sophia?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're talking about these two principles so far, like there's such like an ick and cringy feeling in my body because I realize that this is not how I was brought up and this is how I want to be. But it's like and it happened last night. Isabella and I got into a tussle and and I realized like I was literally there saying, okay, this is not the way I want to be, but I could not like budge myself. It 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 actually felt like it would be uncomfortable if I tried to be different than I was in that moment feeling. And I'm like, this is not how I want to be, but I'm stuck.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's interesting because I know these principles and I've tried these principles and I hear you guys talking about them and how to like, put them into play and stuff like that. But I'm realizing that sometimes it's just like, I don't want to go there because again, it feels uncomfortable. And even listening to you talk about them right now feels uncomfortable because I couldn't do it last night.
Yeah. And that's where that gentleness comes back in of no one does this 100% of the time. There is no reality in which all these things happen. And that's why we have repair. That's, the principle of self-care is coming. Choice is coming. There's some other ones that help, but this is not to give you a tool to beat yourself up with. No, this is, wow, what's here? What's needed? What do I need in these situations? Like Jen has said a couple of times now, this is an opportunity to notice that maybe you're not getting a need met. And so what is that need? What is it that you need? Because there's something going on there for you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I just really want to validate that it's anything that's unfamiliar is going to feel uncomfortable. Even if it's good for you, like lifting heavy weights is going to feel uncomfortable if you're not used to doing it, even if it might be good for you in the long run, right? And also that the curiosity about, okay, if you were needing to be in your comfort zone, which in your nervous system is not mutual support and cooperation or welcome, instead of in your growing edge, which is doing the thing that's a little hard and uncomfortable, that's how you want to be showing up, then why? We can't be in our growing edge unless enough of our needs are being met to be able to step outside of the comfort zone,
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Anything else on mutual support and cooperation? Anyone wants to share or ask? All right, we'll shift to the next one. I think I really like this one too. This one is choice. So we all get the idea of being able to say yes or no or maybe, like that makes sense to us. But what I really like about the way that Ray talks about choice here is that it is moving at a pace or a tempo that allows each individual to track their experience to know if the direction feels right. Because if we are going from thing to thing to thing to thing, we are going to lose our choice. And I've been saying this for a very long time. When we can slow down enough to notice what's happening for us, then we have choice. Then we can do something different. But if we're going too fast in our pacing for our nervous system, then we miss our opportunities for choice. And in our communities, in families that are healthy, in healthy groups, there is room for no. No is not only, allowed, but it is welcomed and honored because it is a repair for those places in our own childhoods where we were forced, where we didn't have choice. And in a relationship with someone else, it can be reparative for them as well, whether that's your own child and you haven't necessarily given room for choice, or it's another relationship where that's showing up and there isn't room for choice. It's reparative for that other person as well. So it is about going slow enough. And most of us did not see this modeled either. Most of us didn't have parents who went slow enough to track themselves to notice what they needed. And so it wasn't modeled for us. And it's not modeled in our society. We got to keep going. Next, what's next? What's next? And I know that that many of you very consciously have slowed down from the normal world, whatever that means, what everybody else seems to be doing. But even so, that may not be slow enough yet to track your own nervous system and your own yes and your own no. But choice is essential for healthy relationships. Essential. Anything to add, Jen?
I think one of the things that's most important when first starting to try to orient towards the idea of choice and whether or not something feels like a yes or a no is to slow way down, because it's not that the pace for every person necessarily needs to be super slow forever, but for most of us, if we have a lifetime of practice at doing what we're told or what we're going to be rewarded for or what we think we're supposed to, and not listening to that internal guidance, it's going to take some time to get past all of those layers and actually listen to the internal guidance or even tune into its existence. And it, for most people, takes longer than it feels like it should at first. And if we don't go slow enough for that, then it's very easy to just continue to override that. And then realize way after the fact, oh, I wasn't actually, that wasn't actually what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It also, I'm just thinking about how for some of us, we're really good at giving other people a choice. Maybe that's our child, maybe that's another person. We can see that, but coming back to us, are we giving ourselves the opportunity to say no if it's a no? Are we checking in with what we really need? Because many times we're outward focused, especially as parents. We're like, okay, let's make sure you have a choice, the green shirt or the red shirt. We learn that when our kids are little, we need to give them choice, but we may not have had choice and we may not give ourselves that choice.
And again, with curiosity about what's needed, another thing I see a lot is someone realizing that something is a no that they don't really feel like they actually have a choice about. Or sometimes there are situations where something needs to happen and just saying no isn't really an option, like a medical procedure that's needed or something like that for a child, right? And there may not be an option for the kid to say no. But there can be curiosity about what might be needed to make it tolerable, or what kind of support could be brought in, for ourselves if we're having a no about something that we don't want to just not do? You know, if we're having a strong no about cleaning the bathroom, you know, is it possible for there to be a different person who cleans the bathroom? Or is it possible to put on some fun music and dance while cleaning the bathroom together or something? You know, so again, with bringing in curiosity, and it sort of being the start of the conversation instead of the end of the conversation.
Mhm. Yeah. Thanks, Jen. Okay, so the next one, you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Oh, hang
Next we
on.
have
I saw Carrie's hand up. Hang on a second. Oh, you're muted.
I just wanted to add that after the call the other day, and then, I have added these stay positive in life quotes on Instagram. So when I get the choice, when the chance to read it, I found this one that kind of resonated with everything we're thinking, what we're talking about, and also what you're saying right now. It says, the people you have in your life affect your nervous system and therefore your health. Choose wisely. And it was and I was like, wow, this is as reinforcing everything that we're saying. And it just popped up for me again to remind me.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, Carrie. Yeah, choose wisely. Choose wisely. Yeah. And welcome, Natalie.
All right, principle 4 is self-regulation and the pause, taking the time we need in order to be able to integrate our experience moment by moment. When a pause is taken, processing stops until the person's pause is complete. The intention of the pause is to allow space for one's own self-regulation, and thus it can only be taken for oneself, not for others. Sorry about that. That was the pause can only be taken for oneself, not for others. So there's two parts of this that I think are important. One of them is that, you know, all the things that we've talked about it taking time to get into the what's happening in our internal guidance, and whether we have a choice, and whether there's welcome, and what we might need, and all of those things. That's what the pause is for, you know, or the moments like Sophia was talking about feeling like there was conflict and dysregulation, and needing some space from that. That's what the pause is for, is to have that, take that space. And the other part that's really important is that I need a pause. So I am taking that space for me. It doesn't work to tell somebody else to take a pause. We can't pause for them, and we can't force somebody else to take a pause, whether that person is a small person or a big person. And we can, especially with young children, help them learn to recognize when they need a pause, but we still can't actually make them take their own pause.
Mhm. Yeah. And it's helpful to have a conversation with whoever this person is that you're thinking about, or in a relationship that needs some support around this. And all of these principles I think are great to talk about, but especially the pause. If you're going to start taking a pause for yourself, and they're going to be in the middle of saying something, you want to have a conversation beforehand so that you're not like, okay, hold on, I need a pause. And they're like, wait, what? What are you doing? Why are you doing that to me? What did I say wrong? And it's really important to be able to give some language ahead of time and say, you know what? We're going to have a conversation, and if I feel activated, if I'm feeling like there's a lot of feelings moving for me, then I may ask for a pause for myself. When we do healing story circles, we often say that at the beginning, you know, if you need a pause, you know, ask for your pause. And it's not about whoever it is. And it can be anybody can take a pause at any time. Because if something is activating, you're no longer present. you're no longer in the conversation. You're in your activation. So you can literally, and again, showing what you might do, like I tend to put a hand up, and if I'm on Zoom, I tend to put it closer to the camera, because otherwise if it's back here, we might not see it or might not understand what it is. And it's different than I'm raising my hand. I have a question. I need a pause. So I want you all to just practice that for a moment. Just what does your pause look like? Yeah, kitty pause, Sophia. Uh-huh. Yeah. And notice how that feels.
And we can use other words for that too, especially when we're in person with somebody, I'm going to take some space. I need a minute. I'm going to think about that. I need to calm down,
I need a
are all,
pause.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When is a pause and not just like your usual flight
Mm.
response?
Mhm. There may be a flight response in that, and
Okay.
and that's okay. But the pause gives you the opportunity to then have choice. Do you need to run away? Sometimes the situation is really intense and you might need 20 minutes to go take care of yourself. It might be more than just, I need a minute here. But if you have a flight response or a fight response or a freeze response, that's a great time to pause. Even better if you notice just activation in your system, asking for a pause so you don't get to fight, flight, or freeze or fawn. So then you end up taking care of somebody else. Yeah.
I just want to add there that I wonder if maybe part of what you're asking is like if there's a frequent flight response, and the pattern is to then run away from the conversation and never come back to it and pretend it never happened and just avoid it. And the difference there is in a pause, after the pause, however long the pause needs to be to regulate, to calm down, to take care of yourself, that then we come back. Then we come back and we repair, or we continue the conversation, or we express what we're needing or whatever might be needed, but we don't just be like, okay, I paused and now it's all over and it never happened and we're never talking about it again.
Over.
Yeah, that's a good distinction. Because I think Isabel and I are just realizing that we both have that flight response. Like we'll just both, and not at the same time, but we'll both just like hands up. It's like, but it's definitely the flight reaction. But I think you just made a really good distinction for me that I have to pay attention to whether I think we do usually come back and it's not like the conversation never happened, but it's definitely an interesting thing to look at.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know for me, with my partner, he's much more likely to want that pause. And it's a lot easier for me, and it's a lot more settling of my nervous system if he says, I need a pause, and I think it's going to be about a half an hour, and I'll touch base back in with you, rather than just retreating, withdrawing, moving away. If there's enough an awareness, and oftentimes he's not aware enough to know, but if he can provide that, I'm going to touch base with you again in a half an hour, that helps to settle my nervous system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, information is so helpful. And we may not always know, like you said, your partner doesn't always know what he needs, but that, hey, I just know I need more than 2 minutes here, and let's check back in 30 minutes or an hour, or, but like a time frame that is not days as something that's shorter.
I
Yeah.
think it can also be really helpful to consider in advance how you might take care of yourself during somebody else's pause. Because I can hear that like activation of like, no, I was doing a thing. I was going, and now you paused me, and now I'm like, what do I do while I wait for you to be done pausing? And so considering in advance, like, would it be helpful for you to move your body in some way to discharge that heatedness? Would it be helpful for you to, um, you know, go do something soothing, make a cup of tea or something? Would it be helpful for you to journal and like say all of those things on paper so that you can organize your thoughts and maybe there can be less heat about it when you come back to it? But considering in advance how to care for yourself so that you're not stuck while someone else is taking a pause.
Yeah. Yeah. And Meredith, you asked, what is fawn? So with my brain stoplight, I focus really on the fight, flight, freeze. These are our autonomic nervous system patterns. They are on autopilot. Fawn is actually a much more, it requires a lot more of our brain and cognitive power. It's actually a different set of circuits that we learn how to take care of someone else so that we're okay. So it is not, it is like the opposite of mutual support and cooperation. It is those places where we end up losing ourselves in order to take care of someone else, particularly someone who's volatile. So it's that kind of a dynamic. And so it's a different circuitry than the fight, flight, or freeze, but it is also a survival mechanism. It's a very sophisticated survival mechanism, actually. So, yeah, and learned. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Yeah. All right.
I think we're ready for self-care.
Self-care. Self-care. Okay. This is mine, right? Okay, good. Oh, self-care. This is one that I have done a lot of personal work around. So this is that each individual is encouraged to eat, rest, sleep, hydrate, eliminate as needed. And this is the part of this that always blows my mind, because this is the opposite of what I learned growing up. Self-care supports the individual and the group. Wait, what? What? So I take care of myself and I'm actually taking care of other people? Is that what that means? And it's just, that is not what I experienced growing up. And I also, as a parent, for a long time, I didn't get that. And people kept saying, oh, go take care of yourself. And I'd be like, but I got to take care of this baby. I got to take care of this toddler. I got to take care. And they just got older and I just still needed to take care of them. Where is my part? Where do I get to take care of myself? And when I am resourced, they're actually better taken care of. And that is like, I think we have so many things, so many situations, so many experiences in our lives where there's not time to take care of ourselves. We've got to go to the next thing. Somebody else needs something. And so we put ourselves further back on the list. But what does it look like and feel like when you can show up with a full cup into a situation, into a day? Doesn't even matter if it's like a difficult day, just a day when you're taken care of. And I think it gets easier. And maybe, I mean, it definitely has for me as my kids have gotten older. It's gotten a lot easier for me to care for myself and to track what I need. But I think that it's something that most of us have had to work at in some way. Yeah. Yes, self-care is the greatest gift we give to ourselves and to others. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Sarah. How are you all doing with self-care at this point in your lives? Where are you in your list of priorities? And have you moved up over the years? Yeah. I see Meredith nodding. Yeah. See a lot of you. Yeah. Anything anybody wants to say about that?
I have a favorite visual for this, because we always, we often talk about like pouring from an empty cup or a full cup. How are you filling your cup? And there's a woman named Yolanda who runs Parenting Decolonized, who her visual is you're like the top cup on a champagne fountain, and all of the people close to you are like arranged underneath you. And so you shouldn't be pouring out of your cup at all. You should be pouring so much champagne into your cup that it just overflows into everybody else around you. So that's the visual I try to keep in my head. I'm not pouring out of my cup at all. I'm trying to overflow.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I
I
like
never
that.
heard that one. I like that one too, but the one that I always visualize is and I think I made it up, is actually a cup and saucer. And you're never giving out of the cup, you're always giving out of the saucer that's overflowing. So but I like that champagne one. That sounds enticing.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, this has been a growing thing for me too. And as you said, Rebecca, with adult children who are out of the house, it's easier. There are less situations where I'm tending to 73 million needs at one time. So it definitely makes it easier. But I used to say that self-care is a full-time job, and who on earth has time for an additional full-time job? And I have now realized, and this is definitely wisdom that has come with menopause, who doesn't have the time, because if we aren't taking care of ourselves, then we aren't here to be able to do all the things that we want to do. So it needs to be the base. And so it's a little more non-negotiable for me, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yes. Non-negotiable. It just becomes non-negotiable. What else is the point if we can't take care of ourselves? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else on self-care? Okay, I think we can go to the next one. Jen.
Brief, frequent eye contact. Brief and frequent eye contact with the intention of mutual support and cooperation. Without brief eye contact, distance and disconnection often grow and can result in each person beginning to make up stories about the other person based on our own history. And I also like to broaden this a little bit. I mean, eye contact is really important for most people because that's how we interact most directly with other people's nervous systems. So that's how we gauge things like welcome in someone else. But I like to broaden this a bit because there are other ways that we can touch in with somebody. And for example, I spend a lot of time with autistic people who might have a harder time accepting or wanting eye contact. There might be another way. There might be touch, or there might be mutually directed attention, or there might be something else that feels better for some people as a way of sort of this briefly checking in and maintaining connection process. And even if we're not in a visual space with someone, like if they're far away, we can have this kind of thing over text or something, that the idea is and one of the ways that I recognize this is if I'm starting to tell myself a story of, oh, that person hasn't called because they don't like me anymore, then that is information that I have not been staying enough in connection with that person. And to, instead of feeding into the story, to just touch in and reestablish that that connection.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you're saying too about especially those with autism or just sensitivities in their nervous system. And this also isn't meant to be like, and now we stare at each other or we give each other intense contact. But when a relationship is disconnected, barring something else going on with that individual, eye contact is one of the first things to go. And so, and this also, like, even thinking about a baby and how a baby will make eye contact and then they will look away. So it's brief and frequent eye contact. It's not staring. It's that, and then the ability to look away, the ability to come back into connection with your eyes, and then the ability to move away, and having choice about that. So it's really important that it isn't an obligation. Like, I have a cousin with autism, and my uncle, God bless him, does not understand autism. And I hadn't met him before. And so it was, here, come meet your cousin. And then look at her, look at her, look at her. It was like, oh God, stop. Just please don't do that to him. I don't need that. I want him to take care of himself and what he needs, and he does not need. So I watched him like look at me like this, like just like I need to look, but I can't look, and I'm overstimulated and it's not working for me. And I'm like, it's okay. And you don't have to hug me either, because I want you to have choice. And yeah, so but recognizing that brief and frequent eye contact, when there's connection, there's just a natural, just a glance. It's not a long thing. So I'm doing this constantly here. I'm making eye contact with you. You can't necessarily tell because Zoom, but I'm constantly doing that. And this is how we connect in social nervous system, even on Zoom. Like, if we all take a moment and we all just look around at everybody who's here, just take a moment, just briefly look at each person and notice what happens. Notice how it feels. There's like, I perceive like a settling. Right. So this is harmonic resonance. This is what that's called. And we can do it in an environment in person too. I've actually done this in rooms with like 200 or 300 people, including small children, like at Love H League conferences, where I ask everybody to just look around briefly at each other, and then the whole room goes quiet, including all the babies. So it's really powerful, this idea that we can connect this way, even if it's just a second, 2 seconds. Yeah. So healthy relationships have at least understanding about eye contact. And that may not be, like Jen said, it may not be like, and now we're looking at somebody who doesn't want that, because that's also part of it. It's part of mutual support and cooperation. It's part of choice. It's part of self-care. All of these things all weave together. Yeah. That doesn't override. But we got to have eye contact or it's not healthy. It's all of these things working together, mutual support and cooperation. Yeah. Anything else there?
I think I just want to add that for me, what I found one of the most helpful things about this principle is tuning my attention towards what's happening in my mind in a relationship. Because when there is connection, whether it's through eye contact or through something else, when the relationship feels very connected, there's enough like actual connection happening in the relationship that there's not really room for a made up story about the relationship. And so for most of my life, when I felt disconnected in a relationship, I didn't have those words for it. I didn't say, oh, I'm feeling disconnected. I just was like, oh, this person must blah, 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 blah. And there's a whole story happening in my head. That story is existing to fill the vacant space in the relationship. And so now using this principle as a tuning of my brain to, oh, my brain's making stuff up. Why is there room for that? And then reorienting to connection in the relationship.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for that, Jen. Yeah. Reorienting to connection. Yes. Okay, we have two more principles just to orient you. The next one is touch and attention. And this goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about. But I think from a very early age, most of us had coupled attention and touch. So when we were babies, when we got attention, there was usually touch associated with it. And when there was not touch, we probably also weren't getting a lot of attention. There's a coupling that happens, but they are two separate things. And what they say is infants appear to be as responsive to what adults do with their attention as with their touch. So, and I think we all are, honestly. So think about it in terms of, so I am here with you. I am sharing. My attention is here. I'm obviously not touching any of you through the screen, but my attention is here and you can feel me here. If all of a sudden my attention goes somewhere else, like to my phone that's over here, and then I don't say anything, what happens for you? What do you feel? And then, oh, okay, yeah, here I am. I'm back, right? Versus I need to shift my attention for a second. I'm going to move my attention to my phone and okay, great. And now I'm back. And just noticing how that feels. So our attention can shift, and our attention shifts all the time. We have lots and lots of things that we need to give attention to. But when we can name it, I think if Ray had lived a little bit longer, that naming would have been its own principle, because naming is so important. Naming I need a pause, naming where my attention is going, naming what I'm doing for self-care, naming, I think runs through all of these also. So where does your attention go? And are you naming it? And then when there's touch, coming into contact with mindfulness and pacing so that the person receiving the touch can have choice about whether or not they want to be touched. So if you are, with your young child, for example, saying, hey, do you want me to put my hand on your back? And then they can say no, or they can say yes, or I'm going to move towards you with my hand now. You let me know when it's too close, or let me know when it feels good. And negotiating that is an important part of a healthy relationship. So where does our attention go, and what happens with our touch? Yeah. Jen, anything to add?
Yeah, I want to add again with the not needing to be perfect, which we talk about with all of these things. Nobody is going to be perfect about doing this every time. Nobody is going to, every single time their attention shifts, think to name it. And I'll just give an example. Last week, my basement flooded, and so my kids were eating lunch, and I ran downstairs to grab something for one of them, and start squishing through the floor.
Oh, that's the worst.
And yeah. And so my attention when I went downstairs was obviously my attention was not with my kids upstairs in another room, but it was still on the thing that we were doing together that I was enabling by going downstairs. And then very suddenly my attention had to shift to, okay, I'm turning off the water main. I'm calling a plumber. This is urgent. I can't just ignore this and leave it there while I give you my attention. And that shift was very difficult, especially for my 5-year-old who was like, no, you were giving me your attention and I wasn't done with it. And in that moment, I did not have the spoons or the time to talk her through that and wait for her to come around to the idea. It was like, no, the flood has to be dealt with now. And then after is when I could come back and reconnect with her and be like, I get it. That was hard. That was hard, maybe a little scary, a little disorienting, happened really fast. And then we could process that and reconnect about it. And, you know, and she could name in words, because she has practice at this, you know, I didn't like that. I didn't like that you just stopped paying attention to me. So yeah, just wanting to, that's the reality. And that's why the repair exists. That's why we can come back to these things after the fact.
That's right. That's right. Thank you for reminding us that we are human, and for the example of a real, like, this is really what it looks like. And it's awareness of these things. It's not necessarily that we're doing them all the time. It's awareness, and it's noticing where it's missing. It's noticing if there's something else that's needed for us or someone else. Yeah. All right. Confidentiality.
All right, principle 8, confidentiality. We can speak freely about our experience, hold sacred each other's stories, and ask permission before sharing them. Babies and children's confidentiality is often violated. If we're going to talk about our children to others with them present, include them in the conversation. I think this one is relatively self-explanatory. We don't talk about somebody else's stuff without their permission. I think the place it can sometimes get a little bit confusing to people is like, okay, but my kid said don't talk about this, but like, I really need to talk about this because I'm having feelings about it or something. And in those kinds of situations, context is really important. You know, like it says in the text of the principle, don't talk about your kid in front of them. finding the support spaces that are for you, where you can talk about those things without it being, you know, your kid is listening to you put them on blast, or your partner or your friend or your mom listening to you put them on blast. But it's a support space for you, and that your support space honors confidentiality as well, so that you are talking about your own experience of whatever's happening, your own triggers, and that then is being kept in that container.
Yeah. The focus is really about, this thing happened and this is what it was like for me. This is what it touched on for me. This is what happened for me. So the focus doesn't become, now I'm just going to vent about this experience that this other person, this thing that they did, and oh my God, can you believe it? It's, this happened and this is what's happening for me. This is where I need the support. And if you are in a group, and you know, our groups tend to be international. They tend to be, you know, you're not going to run into somebody at the grocery store, most likely, unless you've invited a friend to come onto these calls. But that doesn't mean that it's okay for you to, oh my God, I was on this call and this person said blah, 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 blah. No, we want to hold the space sacred. And if you're on a call, unless you have permission, and you could ask permission, hey, the story that you shared with me really touched me. Can I share that with my sister? Because I think it would really help her with something that she's working with. And you might get permission. But if it's somebody told a story and it touched on something for you, then you just want to say that. You know, I was on a call earlier and somebody shared a story about their mother, and it reminded me of, or it touched on this part of my story. So we want to hold that confidentiality. And most of us had our confidentiality violated growing up. And so we want to be really cautious with that in the space, and also with your friends, with your loved ones. I think one of the most cringe moments that I've had was I was on a walk in my neighborhood, and I was walking with a friend, and she stopped, she saw a friend, and her daughter, who was maybe 13 or 14, was standing there, and the mother was talking about her in front of her. And like the daughter was like kind of jumping in, like, well, why are you saying that? And it was just like, I can tell you've been doing this since this child was little, and you haven't noticed that she's big now, and you're still doing it. And it's like, you're violating her confidentiality. It didn't really feel safe to me. I was like, oh, I felt so protective of this girl. So yeah, so we just want to be aware. Confidentiality is a huge part of a healthy relationship as well. Yeah. And that goes for if you are a parent with a baby and your baby is present on a call. And I do this, I stop parents all the time. Your baby is here, your child is here. Include them in the conversation. Let them know what you're talking about. Yeah. So those are the 8 principles. So I'm curious if you have any anything that is really landing for you about the relationship that you came in thinking about. And if we want, we can take just a moment if you want to type in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and just share a brief thing that you're taking with you. Love to hear.
I can share. So, as I said, I know these principles. I've known them for a long time. Isabel knows these principles, and she's known them for a long time. And what I'm taking with me is that it's okay not to do it perfect every time. Like I said, last night was a perfect example. We were both totally dysregulated. And as hard as I tried to, get the pause in there or, do something else, I know that I definitely asked her, do you want a hug? And she was like, no. I was like, okay. But, by the time we were, I guess, repairing, then she was ready for a hug. But yeah, just remembering that these take practice, and we're not going to be perfect with them all the time. And yeah, I also am going to take away Jen's story about the flood and not being able to name it in the moment, and remembering, oh, okay, but we can always go back later and check in and name it then. And yeah, just checking in and at a later time. I don't know. I think sometimes I can speak for myself. I know that sometimes I just think, oh God, I ruined everything. Like that's God, it's all ruined. It's never going to be good again.
Mm.
And that's kind of scary. And I think it's just, definitely because of, how I was raised and how my family, still is to this day. And I'm trying really, really hard not to do that with my kids. So anyway, but yeah, it can feel scary sometimes though.
Mm.
Definitely, but definitely taking that piece about, okay, that's why there's repair. That's why you can go back. And it's not the end of the world, which sometimes it feels like. So,
Yeah. Thanks,
you.
Sophia. Yeah. You get to be human, and it's not going to ruin everything. Yeah. Thanks, Sophia. Anyone else like to share?
Yeah, so for me, I'm actually here examining a partnership. So that's new. I'm excited that this was an opportunity. And when you sent it out, it was like, you can look at all these kinds of relationships, because I did this work as a parent for many years. And now my focus is elsewhere because my kid is not in the house anymore and we are great. So I found really interesting. I mean, so I guess I would say first, I was really encouraged that like these things are pretty dialed in for me, which is amazing.
Awesome.
The important reminder that was good for me to hear was the piece under the mutual support and cooperation, where we talked about the, paying attention to ourselves. Because I think even just hearing that heading or that title of the mutual support and cooperation, I didn't automatically think about like just me, right? It was like, oh yes, we work together and everybody's happy. But it's like I sometimes really need that piece broken out about like, that means that our needs, our individual needs are important. And that piece where you said sacrificing ourselves is not, that doesn't work. Like that's not part of it. Right. So that was for me just another good reminder. And I've gotten so much better about paying attention to myself over many years of relationships, be they with adults or young people. So that was something for me that I really appreciated hearing. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Meredith. So good to see you.
You too.
Exciting. Oh,
Yeah.
Natalie. And then
I
Sarah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I can think about these principles in relationships that are about like connection, but like for example, there are relationships that are not necessarily with people that we want to be in connection, but you have to be in relationship. Like people in our co-op, or people in like my husband's family. So do these principles also are also applied there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in family relationships, but even your relationships in your co-op. In order for them to be healthy, there needs to be choice. There needs to be mutual support and cooperation. There needs to be welcome. All of these things. And they may not all be there, but that's information.
So, for
Yeah.
example, in the principle that they were talking about, when you start to create ideas in your head about what's happening, and then there's what's happening there, there's this connection. I mean, I don't know how to translate that into a relationship that's not about like a deeper connection, like.
Yeah.
So-
So that's information about what's happening for you. And you may or may not choose to go get more information from that person or try to connect more with that person, but you can see what's happening for you. The story I'm making up in the absence of a connection here is this, that I am, whatever is happening for you. So it's an opportunity for you to explore what's yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Natalie.
I do think that brings up a really helpful thing, because we're talking about nurturing these things within essentially healthy relationships. But this can also be a barometer of whether or not a relationship is healthy, if there are maybe things that need to be worked on in order for the relationship to be healthier, if some of these things are not present. Or in the case of a relationship where someone else is not willing or able to nurture some of these principles, then we may need different boundaries with that person, around our time or our emotional energy or our communication or something like that, so that we maintain an orientation towards safety for ourselves and taking care of ourselves. Or potentially it may be information that is not a relationship that we want to have, depending on the circumstances and whether that's something that makes sense. So yeah, not every relationship is just magically healthy and has all the things. Unfortunately.
And not every relationship do we want to put the effort into, to try. So yeah. Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, and I'm gonna try and be succinct in regards to this, but it really resonated. The idea that if we're not necessarily in connection, then we have the space in our brains to create stories that may or may not have any validity, which is where I am now with my, when I had little ones, it was like, okay, I need to lean in towards connection. Whenever there was something going on, I need to lean in towards connection. With grown children, it's like helping to provide space and doing it more on their time frame. So it's an interesting place to be. And I feel like when they were little, it was sort of a biological, like, okay, there was biology driving my need, my leaning in towards connection, and our society focusing on independence rather than interdependence doesn't feel biological to me. And so it's like, all right, okay, let's just give them space. And when I do give them space, they then come back. But it's that void, that space in between where I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the connection before they're ready for the connection. And yet I want to really give them space and honor that. And I think that also feeds into the second principle of mutual support and renegotiating that, because when they're little teeny tiny and they are 100% dependent on us, and then as they get older that shifts, and now it's like, okay, they are adults, they are separate, fully separate individuals, and how to navigate constantly that. Okay. And I'm really hoping, I mean, I think my son, who's 24, is leaning in towards interdependence more so, but my daughter's really at 21 and this like fiercely independent. And so navigating all that is really
navigating. So much navigation right now. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. So glad
Thank you for
came.
offering this. I really appreciate it. I needed the perspective.
Awesome. So glad you came. Yeah. Gary, anything you want to share?
I definitely can relate to a lot of these, but I would have to say if I had to pick one that I've been working on, and I think I probably said this maybe the other day too, was the self-regulation and the pause. And I notice now that I catch myself. I go to say something and I'm like, no, you're supposed to have validated what they said and not have tried to offer. So I'm really working on that. I think the self-care piece, I went to the gym this morning and I'm proud that I can stick to that, even though I could let other things take me over. And the confidentiality piece, I think I'm pretty good at that. So I definitely have some work to do. The eye contact is definitely, I think the digital technology is making that really hard sometimes. But I'm going to be more aware of that. I think that's where I'm at.
Cool. Thank you, Carrie.
Welcome.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming, for being here with us. And I'm so glad that you took the time for yourself today to explore whatever it was that you felt the call to be here. And let us know if you have any questions. And we're here if you are looking for another layer of support in some way. So, yeah.
And our SOAR school, you can still join. When are you closing it for module 1? It's coming up.
Yeah, like tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
so join quick if you want to join in with us for module 1, and we'll be diving into all of these principles and our patterns that show up in relationships over the course of the whole next year.
Yep. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much for doing this work. So important.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.